This episode of the podcast is brought to you by The Truth About Cancer. All right, so look, I want you to listen to something. This is an excerpt from the trailer from this documentary series. Listen to that, and then I want you to go to cancertruthevent.com to register and watch the entire series for free. So, all right, so check this out.
It doesn't matter where you're from, whether it's the USA, Europe, Asia, or Australia, you cannot escape this avalanche. It has intruded into every corner of the globe. It's engulfed this planet and wreaked havoc upon men, women, and children alike. It has torn apart husbands, wives, mothers, and fathers from their precious children and grandparents from their grandchildren. It's the curse of our time, the dreaded disease, cancer. And I know it has affected your life and your loved ones. And I guess you're not satisfied with the answers that you've been given. Maybe you can't shake the question, what if there is a better way? What if we do not have to suffer? What if people are tragically dying without having access to what truly works? What if there are more effective treatments and preventions that will make cancer a disease of the past? Welcome to The Truth About Cancer, a global quest. If these are questions you've been asking, you're about to see some things that will shock you.
Okay, so look, by now you know how important this event is to me, and you know I'm on a mission to get as many people as possible to see it. And you know that there's information in this series that may very well save people's lives. So what I need you to do is go to cancertruthevent.com and sign up to gain free access to this documentary series. And please share the link, cancertruthevent.com. Thank you. We're also brought to you by Hormones, a women's wellness summit. This event is underway, folks, so don't miss another second. If you're experiencing symptoms related to hormones like fatigue, weight loss, depression, hair loss, anxiety, and more, I want you to know that you're not alone, but there is hope. You can get answers and solutions to these problems right now. Go to hormoneevent.com and join thousands of others who are gaining knowledge, clarity, and confidence. Our good friend Bridget Danner is connecting you with over 35 world-class experts in the field of women's health and hormones, experts like Jolene Brighton, Stephanie Granke, Trudy Scott, Jen Whitman, Daniel Kalish, Pedram Shojai, and many, many more. Go to hormoneevents.com to learn more, to gain access and receive valuable bonuses right now. That's hormoneevent.com. Okay, here we go. On today's show, we welcome Jason Prall from calixperformance.com. This conversation went in about a million different, very weird and awesome directions. It brought up some very interesting philosophical questions about who we truly are, the fact that we seem to be simultaneously competing against nature and you know that we are nature, so we're literally competing with ourselves in a way. We talk about this delicate balance of technology and our health and the health of the planet. Just a great conversation. Jason is a seriously smart dude, and maybe makes you think about things and question things in a way that you might not have before, if that makes sense. Anyway, here's Mike and I with Jason Prall. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rebel Health Tribe podcast. I almost said webinar because we do so many webinars and so many other things. I'm Joe Rignola with Michael Roseline. What's up, Michael?
Yo, this one's a podcast.
This one is a podcast. They get confusing after a while.
It is. This is, it's 11 in the morning where I am, and I've been on 2 video conference calls, a guest on 1 podcast, and now we're recording this.
Nice.
So
you're not busy at all, is what you're saying?
No, but I'm becoming very close with my microphone here throughout the day. So.
That's good. You should be. So, right. Joining us today is Jason Prall from calixperformance.com. What's up, Jason?
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Let's start out. Just give folks a little background about what you do, why you do it, and where like folks can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, it's always a tough question for me to answer because, I'm a non-licensed practitioner, if you will. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I work with people with, chronic diseases, chronic issues, and try to get them going in the right direction so that they can live a normal, healthy, and vibrant life.
Nice. So what kind of modalities do you use to go about helping folks?
Yeah, I kind of get back to the basics. I think I've navigated into kind of a world of biophysics, if you will, which sounds all complex and everything, but at the end of the day, it's really about interacting with your environment and how that interaction, I think, can play a role in health. Because I think that's one of the things that's it gets neglected often. And we look at diet, we look at a lot of different things. We use herbs and we use supplements and different modalities, and that's all well and good. And I think each aspect has its place. But one of the things that we really don't do much of is look at our environment and then how we interact with our environment. So that's really, I think, where I've found a niche, and really where I want to be is helping people understand how to look at their environment to create health, and how their interaction with it can either manifest disease or manifest health.
Awesome. What made you shift into, or I don't know if it was a shift, but what were you? Did you have a different gig before you were doing this health stuff?
Yeah, I've gotten, man, my route to this has been kind of wacky. I started as a mechanical engineer. I did that for 10 years. I was classically trained as sort of a mechanical manufacturing engineer. Had my own health issues, like so many of us do in the health and wellness world. That kind of prompted some investigation, some learning, some curiosity, and kind of I found that the system was not set up to generate wellness. So kind of navigating through that process led me to kind of the nutritional aspect of things, the physiology, the exercise, all that stuff. And eventually got into the whole organic food movement, started growing my own vegetables and fruits, and getting rid of chemicals, all that stuff. And that made a big difference in my life. So I felt the need to educate people there. And then I kind of started getting into a little bit more of the geeky stuff, some of the functional medicine stuff, and the different modalities there. And I found a home for a while. And what was interesting, though, is that people would come to me with all kinds of various illnesses and issues, and they'd be on an autoimmune paleo diet, for example, and they still weren't getting better. And so it just kind of, after working with enough people, I realized that food and exercise isn't enough. And so that I started looking into why that might be, what's going on here. And after digging into a lot of the research and the studies and everything, I realized I could find really anything I wanted to find with the research, right? Like I could find an explanation for any argument that I wanted to make regarding food or exercise or what have you. And so, after a while, it kind of started to make sense that it's really the context that all this stuff matters, right? So one person's diet can be different, and it probably should be different than another person's diet, and to generate the same level of health or disease. And so, kind of, I basically my engineering mind took over, and I kind of found this different world of how our environment plays a role. And so, the physics of this whole thing came into play, and ultimately physics underpins everything. And to be honest, we don't have a really great grasp of it at the highest level. So it's kind of interesting, and it's really complex. But at the end of the day, I think where I've come to be is it's just about how we interact with our environment. So, I still use my engineering mind, my analytical ability, I think is really what I can bring to the table in this whole health world. And I've kind of sliced through a lot of the different aspects of functional medicine, nutrition, etc., and tried to take what I can from all those I guess learning lessons that I've picked up throughout the years, and try to apply them in the most basic fundamental ways for people that maybe they're missing in some of their other parts of what they've been given, I guess, in their health journey.
So back to basics a little bit in some cases. You and Mike were talking before we started, which I thought was really interesting, is how some people want to dig into some of the more complex stuff when they haven't necessarily addressed some of the basic stuff like sleep, water, stress, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it's understandable. I mean, we talk about that stuff, and I think fundamentally we understand why it's important, but we've kind of been trained to not think about how really, truly important it is. I mean, in a normal city environment, for example, you might have a person that never touches their body to the earth for weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that may not sound like a big deal, but that's pretty profound. Our whole biology for thousands and thousands of years was connected to the earth 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that and you contrast it with where we're at now, and literally people will not touch the earth with their body for weeks or months at a time because we have shoes on, we are sleeping elevated off the ground. I mean, there's just no reason to interact with the environment in that sort of physical sense. And so when you kind of start looking at things in those terms, you really kind of figure out how far off base we've gotten. And so, and nobody's really talking about that stuff because it's a little abstract. It's kind of death by a thousand cuts. So how do you address it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I get it. And then the other part of it is that a lot of us in the health world, we got to make money too. And so, a lot of us are empaths. We love if we could just help people, right? In fact, a lot of us, that's kind of our downfall, is that we give away too much information and our resources. So the business model, I think, has gotten in the way a lot of times for a lot of practitioners. And that's not a knock. That's just kind of sometimes I think what happens. And so maybe some people fall into the line of pushing too many supplements too quickly, too often, as opposed to maybe getting back to the basics and doing a little bit more education. So I think there's a lot involved with this, and I understand why people are a little bit misled when it comes to getting back to the basics, because we're just not pushing that information in the health world these days.
I also think maybe some of those basics are, even though they're basic, in some cases, it's the hardest thing for people to do, to change.
Absolutely.
Change diet, change sleep habits, try to manage stress, do things like connecting with the earth, breathing properly, not sitting for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Those are the basic things that are the hardest. I wonder if certain people, maybe even subconsciously, take on some of the more complex stuff where they have a gene mutation or a virus infection or something like that, almost as a scapegoat, just a way to kind of put off doing the basic obvious stuff.
I couldn't agree more. I actually think that's quite common, and I think a lot of us, whether or not we know it, probably identify with our disease or our illness or our condition in a way, because it sort of defines us. And when we don't maybe know who we are, we don't have a really good sense of self, that can be a pretty big defining characteristic. And then, as you mentioned, absolutely, it is the hardest thing in the world to change. Why? Because our lifestyles, our whole economy, our everything that is set up to do the opposite, right? We're set up to be inside. We're set up to be on and using technology all the time. We're not set up to be living our lives outside, sleeping on the ground, all huddled together in communities, relaxing. It's literally the opposite. We are stressed nonstop. We are inside all the time. We are more disconnected in a real sense than we've ever been. And so we're literally fighting, we're swimming against the current in every facet. And so it is the hardest thing in the world. And a lot of people don't know how to even start that process. And so, that's the thing. And I will always admit and let people know that it's the hardest thing to do. But I just want to basically open people's eyes. I want to help people understand that they have a choice, and this is, it's a choice that they can make. And so hopefully we can start to create a culture, start to create a society, an environment that allows people to start making these shifts. I think that's happening. I'm confident that it will continue to happen, but it's going to take a lot of education and a lot of acknowledgement that we're doing a lot of things wrong, and we've got to recognize that. It's a huge problem, and it's going to have to change. And I think it's, in a way, it's both getting better with the younger generation and also getting a lot worse because technology is their life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Did you ever see the Louis C.K. bit where he says we must be aliens? Because how could we possibly be from the Earth if we hate everything about the Earth? Like, we don't want to get dirty, we don't like the cold, we don't like the hot, we have to be inside, it's got to be the perfect temperature, we want to sanitize our...
Yeah, there's no way we could possibly be from here.
No way.
There's what I kept thinking is how there's been, when you were talking about all this, that we've created this like false idea that we're somehow separate from everything else. That like, there's us, and then there's outside, and there's animals, and there's the ocean, and there's fish, and there's birds, and there's whatever else. That it's different. Man and nature are competing, or we have to master it, or we have to like control it, which has been the goal of this, whatever you want to call advanced society since it started, was ways to manipulate and control and manage and defeat nature. Like people live in Chicago. I lived in Chicago. That's insane to me from a perspective of like, you're just, migrating along, and then winter comes the first time and kills 3/4 of the people you're with. And then someone was like, this is a good idea, let's set up camp here. But then they had to figure out how to survive in that. So then it became them versus the nature. Like, how do we stay warm? How do we stay sheltered? And I think that evolutionary thing of trying to control your environment to a point where it's safe for you, safer or more comfortable, or farming or whatever, has evolved into this thing where we literally see everything completely separate. Like, people see themselves more a part of this phone than they do of the park across the street. And like, I think that, maybe this is just redundant, but I think that's exactly the problem. Like, that's
absolutely it is the problem.
It's ingrained like heavily. Like it's we learn it from when we're little. Like, that's outside.
Yep.
And we sleep inside. We go outside, when it's nice outside, and we're never taught that there's any benefit to being outside.
Well, I think, and we're starting to see the ramifications of this. And I think you totally hit the nail on the head. We really are not interacting with our environment in a cohesive way, right? We need to be synchronizing with our local environments, and that's the only way that we can manifest health. And not only that, we've got to facilitate a global environment that makes sense. But look, nobody likes to talk about this stuff, but we are seeing the ramifications of this. We are seeing this de-evolution, if you will. I think Japan, I think they had, if I remember correctly, a million births last year and 1.3 million deaths. So they lost 300,000 people in a matter of a year. So we're seeing the ramifications of this type of thing, and it's manifesting in autoimmune conditions, in cancer, in all sorts of diseases that are not primordial. These shouldn't be happening. You don't see autoimmune conditions in a cheetah in the wild. You don't see cancer in a bird in the wild.
But you do in a dog that lives in your house.
Absolutely. Our household pets are getting these same diseases. We're getting these diseases. And, we call these things mysteries. But, look, you don't have to understand the precise mechanisms. Life is so complex. Our biology is so complex. And while I think it's useful that we're looking into some of these things, we're kind of missing the obvious stuff. And this is really where I've made it a point to try to illuminate, right? We need to start recognizing where the big, let's go after the low-hanging fruit, guys. Like, let's not try to get into the insane, crazy science of some of this stuff if we don't need to. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to need to in order to bring the obvious answers to fruition. And in order for people to accept the obvious answers, we're going to have to explain it to them in the most defined, detailed way. And
prove to me
that
it is
what it is good. Right. And maybe it is what it is. But I think it's fundamentally where we're off. And this is more of a philosophical issue, I think, than anything. But we've got to harmonize with nature, period. You said it. We're not a part of it. We're not separate from it. We are within it and a part of it, and we've got to recognize that fact. And this doesn't have to get woo-woo and all kinds of, hippie weird stuff. This is just straight, look, this is how things work. We need to become aligned with it. And it doesn't mean we need to ditch technology. It doesn't mean we need to ditch our modern lives. We've clearly made some really good strides in a lot of areas. But with everything that we do, I think we need to be thinking about how can we harmonize with nature? How can we use nature's blueprints and lesson plans in order to create a modern world that we can thrive in? Because as soon as we start to deviate from that, that's when disease manifests. And it's really as simple as that. You can get really complex, but once we start deviating from the way our biology has been evolving for thousands of years, we start to see issues. And this is no different than, you could call it Darwinism, right? I mean, we're literally weeding out the quote-unquote weak, or the and this is probably isn't going to be a popular thing to say, but people are getting sick that aren't able to handle this current environment. Right. And that's what's happening. This is sort of a epigenetic experiment or shift, but the problem is that our environment's changing too fast for our genome to keep up. And so, naturally the environment would change, right? This has happened since the dawn of time, right? The environment is always changing, but it's happened at a pace where life can keep up. And when it doesn't, mass extinction events occur. And so this allows life to kind of reset, if you will, and start anew that matches its environment. And so I think what's happening right now, and I don't think it's going to be this huge mass extinction event necessarily, but I think what we're seeing is that we're seeing birds, bees, whales, marine life, algae, humans. I mean, we're all kind of in this dire circumstance right now, and they're not separate. Everything is connected, and we've got to understand that everything that we do plays a role. So it's in everything. I mean, I'm in California, and this is a great example. I was thinking about this on my walk to the grocery store this morning. I see these little fake lawns. It's a very common thing here in sort of the yuppie Santa Monica area.
In San Diego.
Right, okay. And on the surface it makes sense, right? Okay, let's not use and waste water to grow grass. I mean, grass is just this superficial kind of thing that we think of as this pretty way to landscape our
outside carpet.
Houses. Right. And I get that, right? Like it does look good. I'll give it that. But here's what we're literally, in order to generate these lawns, how much plastic and oil do we have to go mine and dig up and manufacture in order to generate this artificial lawn so that we could save water? And then why aren't we using that land in a more natural way? So, and then that same person's going to drive a Prius. And a Prius, okay, maybe that's great, maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, going back to my engineering world, electricity, in order to generate electricity, most places have to burn coal. Some places can use water and that kind of thing, but how clean is coal? So, we've got to really rethink everything that we're doing, because it all impacts everything. And so you're just going to have to see the world through a little bit different viewpoint and different lens in order to appreciate, A, how complex this is, and B, how much every decision you make matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I think at some point we either have to, we're going to have to be okay maybe with going back a few generations on the iPhone instead of having to mine for new minerals to make those things, and having essentially slave labor people making the phones, and the pollution that it creates making these so-called cheap electronics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in technology and human innovation. Sure. I think our human innovation it never ceases to blow me away with what we're capable of creating. I think that we can continue with technology and advancing it. We just, like I said, we've got to start from the mindset of, is this, synchronizing with nature? Is this harmonizing with what we're fundamentally meant to be around? And so if we can do that, if we can start with that, not come and retroactively apply that thinking after we've screwed up, right? Agent Orange, asbestos, glyphosate, and all the chemicals and all the things that we're doing. And now in my world, in my view, it's blue light, and it's these EMF sources: radio, TV, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell signals. We're coming in after the fact, and this is the way technology and science and capitalism has always worked. So I get that, but but we've got to start from the mindset of, is this good, in the grand scheme of things, in every facet? Is it going to be beneficial? And if not, then maybe we need to rethink about, if we should be implementing this type of thing.
Yeah. How do you? When is good enough enough? Like I have, I think I've got the iPhone 6, or whatever the technology is. When is good enough good enough? Like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this gets into some really deep, thinking, because it's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, we're now connected more and more, and quicker than we've ever been, right? Mm-hmm. If you go back and listen to some of the stuff that Nikola Tesla was talking about, mm-hmm. And we're tapping into that. We're now able to experience consciousness and share thought, basically irrespective of time. That's amazing. And so it's going to continue doing these, making these advancements, and the ramifications are interesting, and I'm actually really excited. I hope we get to see some of the things that are coming, and I think we will. Right. It's just that we're going to have to understand what's coming with it. We're going to have to pay a biologic toll, perhaps, along the way, and in order for you to deal with that, you have to understand what is maybe of danger and how to, implement health. And I think it's very realistic to implement some of these healthy things. We just have to recognize what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I see a shift happening. I'm just not sure enough people are willing to look at things the way you're looking at them, saying, is it worth it? Is it worth it to implement some of these new technologies? Before long, we're going to have self-driving cars, and I just feel like, if we stopped here, I'd be okay with that. I think I'd be okay with that. If the trade-off was we'd have to continue to mine for minerals and continue to harm other people and continue to pollute the planet.
But technology can be the thing that fixes a lot of these problems too that we're creating. That's true. What we do with it is entirely up to us. I don't know, have you seen, Jason, the documentary called Transcendent Man about Ray Kurzweil?
No, I haven't. But I hear a lot of his quote-unquote predictions about the future of technology, and mm-hmm. they both fascinate me and scare the living hell out of me.
Yeah, sure.
Because
it's crazy. The documentary is really cool. You would dig it. He has been employed by several presidential administrations. He's pretty much regarded as like the number one. Like, he predicted the housing market crash. He predicted all these other things that have happened, like all sorts of stuff, technology-wise, almost like to the year. Like, he predicted smartphones in like 1985 and said by 2010 we'll have phones that are this and this and this and this, and everyone was like, yeah, right, you crazy wingnut. But he's
still like Nikola Tesla, though.
Yeah, and he's not. I'm not saying the guy's like a prophet. He's not right 100% of the time, but he's a visionary as far as like the speed at which he really understands the speed at which technology is advancing, and that is exponentially fast. And the faster it advances, the faster it can advance, because now we have it advancing itself. Like, now there's like giant supercomputers that can do a gazillion things and make a thing, whatever. But he talks about the singularity event, which I believe his date on that is around 2035, where man and technology essentially merge into the same thing, where we have the internet in our brain, or we have nanobots that can go in our body and fix damaged cells, or produce whatever, or like whatever. And he has kind of he did join in on the warning about AI and artificial intelligence ever having control over any sort of like weaponry and military things and whatever. And that sounds silly, like out of Terminator, like, yeah, let's not give the machines guns, but like, let's not give the machines guns. Mm-hmm. But plus we're the ones programming them, and we love killing everything. So like,
exactly.
Well, if it's our creation, it's likely that it will go berserk. And
I think this is the fundamental issue, or the fundamental thinking that I think needs to shift, because I follow Kurzweil. I think he's basically telling us what's coming. For better or for worse, he's telling us what's coming. And
Have like an attachment or like a this is good or this is bad. Just
Right.
this is happening. What the hell
This
are
is
you
what's
going to
coming.
do about it?
Right, right. And I think, so yeah, I do pay attention to that stuff. And I think what the fundamental philosophy or ideology that we need to instill as this is occurring is data-driven technology, and it's all data-driven. It's ones and zeros. It cannot have consciousness. So we have to understand that there's a massive distinction. And I don't care how quote unquote intelligent AI can get, it'll never be as intelligent as nature. It'll never have consciousness. And so it'll always be separate. It'll always be inferior. I don't understand fundamentally how that can ever sort of fully merge. And so I'm not saying that we're not going that direction, but what I'm saying is that it'll never meet the expectations that I think people maybe think that we can generate. I mean, if we don't understand how powerful consciousness is, how powerful it is, the subtle energies, I mean, there's so much to what we're capable of that we can't even realize, and yet we're trying to develop machines to sort of, I guess, get us there or give us a boost or create this. And hey, look, I don't know, maybe this is how it all unfolds, but I think we have to walk into this future with the understanding that let's go ahead and perfect consciousness first, right? Let's perfect conscious living. Let's perfect being present in the current moment. And this goes back to a lot of the martial arts, a lot of the Eastern philosophies. There's so much more I think that we can gain by going backwards in terms of what we can learn than there is to go forwards necessarily in technology. So this is where I fundamentally disagree with Kurzweil and a lot of the tech advancements. Is those are all well and good, but we need a consciousness shift, I think, to go with those tech advancements, or else you're going to get the dangerous side of that sword.
I totally agree. That
Totally.
we need as a species to have a massive consciousness shift, or else we're running down a road that's going to not be. I mean, we're in a mass extinction. People don't realize this. Like you study biology and like the history of the Earth, like on Cosmos, that series that Fox did with Neil deGrasse Tyson. They had a whole episode about all the mass extinctions that have happened, and like at one point, giant like roach-like creatures were the leading life force on Earth or the leading life on Earth for like, I don't know, something like 75 million years. There were these giant bugs, and the giant bugs were the pinnacle of the life, evolution at the time. And then, something happened and the atmosphere changed and they all died and whatever. And then they get to the end and they say, whatever one, I don't know if this is the sixth one or the seventh one or whatever, but he said there's something different about this one, is that we are causing it. Like, we are the source of it. Like, it's not a meteor. It's not the Earth doing something. It's human activity is causing, and they named off some statistics on, like, how many species of things are dying off, and it's the highest it's ever been since the last meteor struck the Earth.
Right. I mean, and this is what I think we've got to recognize is that, I think there's some sort of, I guess you could say, exterior forces outside of sort of planet Earth that contribute to this thing, that it will always trump whatever we can do. But we are the only species on the planet that can control its environment. No other species does this. They interact with it, and they do so mostly instinctually. We're the only species that has the ability to create, to change, to alter our environment, and unfortunately, a lot of the other species are paying the price for that. And I think in a lot of ways we're looking in the wrong directions as to why that's occurring. So it's interesting. This is why it's so important, I think, to do the work that we're all doing, right? I think this is all playing a role in moving us in the right direction. I mean, I remember, it must have been 8 or 9 years ago, where I was the weird guy eating organic food and growing organic vegetables. I was the weird guy, and this was in Seattle, a fairly progressive.
Kind of a weird guy, but...
Yeah, I know. But this is in Seattle, a fairly progressive, open-minded, organic kind of city, and I was still the kind of the weird guy. And so it's shifted so much, right? I just saw a commercial for. Oh my gosh, I don't know, some cereal, Fruit Loops or something to that effect. And their campaign is that they are now they're removing artificial dyes and colorings from their cereal. And so, I mean, that's fascinating to me, right? But they're actually targeting people with that message that, oh yeah, by the way, for years and years we've been doing all this fake artificial crap and poisoning you. Oh, but now we're good. Now we're going to remove it. And so they're only doing that because we're demanding that, right? The public is demanding these things. And so it's pretty fascinating to see. And I think this is where technology has sort of helped us, right? We're now able to communicate in such a magnificent way. I mean, in 2000, the internet was not the internet that it is today. It wasn't even near. Now we're able to share information and communicate to each other outside of the commercial interests, outside of the political interests. And so it's cool. We're seeing a lot of really cool changes, and I think this will continue. And even in some of the things that I try to really highlight, like the negative consequences of technology, you're starting to see an acknowledgement of that in sort of the mainstream view. I mean, even Apple is now releasing their blue light dimming feature.
I saw that.
Saw that too. Yeah.
Good for them.
Flux, right, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess
sort of.
Flux dominated that market for a long time, and now people demanded it so much, right? They started waking up to the fact that, well, that actually is sort of a play on words, I guess. They can't go to sleep because of this blue light, and so they're waking up to the fact that blue light is creating some of the issues with their sleep, and so they demanded to go to Flux because it made a difference. Well, iPhone recognized that, and that the public needs it, and Apple's a smart company. They're going to move with the times, but it's interesting, right? They're recognizing that the public wants it so badly that they're going to have to add some extra programming. They're going to have to make their screen uglier, right? I mean, these blue light dimming features turn the screen kind of an ugly orange, but people are willing to pay that price, if you will, to be able to sleep. And so it's just, we're now recognizing some of these things, and I think that's a huge one. The fact that Apple is going to be doing that will raise massive awareness, much like some of these big companies like Kellogg's, that are trying to market some of these more natural things. And so
I mean, in a perfect world. In the perfect world, the market can fix this stuff, but
absolutely.
We don't live in a perfect world, and we don't live in a true free market.
Right, but I think here's the cool thing, and this is the big thing that's changed over the last 10 years, is that the free market has become more free in terms of information. Information is now becoming decentralized, and I think, it's
until they can get a hold of that. Like, you're not going to learn any of this stuff on the TV.
No, but it's getting harder and harder to control. I mean, that's the cool thing, is that they're, and when I say they, I don't know who they are, but the corporate interests, or the people, the financial interests, I guess, that might have benefited from controlling this type of thing previously, is now unable to control it. And so, there's a lot of really good things coming, and it's pretty exciting to be a part of it. It's pretty exciting to witness it. And I'm very hopeful, despite sort of maybe my negative undertone about technology and a lot of the way we live our lives. I'm very hopeful, and it's very fun to see this all unfold. I'm just trying to help people recognize that it exists, that we have a problem. And I think once we recognize a problem, just like a drug addict, or you can start to fix it, right? I mean, that's really the fundamental issue here. And let's not let our daily habits and our comforts get in the way of us creating a better reality. I mean, that's bottom line what we need to be doing, is creating a better reality for ourselves, for our future generations, and for the planet as a whole, for all of life on the planet that is getting absolutely destroyed by our decisions.
Well, I vote Jason for president, so
I know you
have a career in politics ahead of you or anything, but no, what you're saying about stuff like how the iPhone is offering this thing now, and like the colors out of the cereals and things like that. Like, I went through my first Czech Institute course in 2008, I believe, maybe 2009, their HLC1. And for a lot of the stuff that they taught in there, it was the first time I'd heard it, like grass-fed versus grain-fed beef. And because I had a master's degree in exercise science and nutrition, I didn't hear a word of that. So go figure. And so I I learned all this stuff. A lot of stuff we just talked about, a lot of things you talk about, we'll just call it stuff. I learned a lot of it and was like, holy shit. I went home and was like, my brain had exploded, and I was like spewing it out at everyone who would listen, and then I was the weird guy, and they were like, shut up and go in the corner, you weird freak. I don't want to hear your nonsense all the time. And now, when I work with, and if I had to work with a client, like we would start at square one, literally, and I would have to teach them all that stuff. Now, when I get an inquiry from a client, they know like 80% of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, people know grass-fed beef. People know organic. People know that makeup and skincare products are toxic. People know that there's rumors that EMFs are bad for us, or like the Wi-Fi. Is the Wi-Fi really bad for my kids? Like, they know, like, the conversation has at least started in every one of those things, and it is light years ahead of where it was 10 years ago. So,
right. Well, I mean, and here's a cool story. I got a message through Facebook the other day, and shameless plug for the podcast that I have out there.
We'll plug the hell out of it in a minute.
Yeah, so. but since I started this podcast and with the desire to share some of the information that I've come across over the past few years, particularly in terms of biophysics and that kind of thing, I've received some interesting information or messages from people that are board certified, that are medical doctors that have gone through the training, and they're like, holy crap, I can't believe this is out there. I can't believe I didn't know this. And they got really excited about some of this information. And so this is what's cool. It's like the fact that I can have a platform to utilize, some of the knowledge that I've picked up and the knowledge of my guests that I bring on to reach people in the system, or that have been classically trained, and help give them a new perspective or a new insight. That's so powerful to me. I mean, now they can use, this is a person that's been trained in physiology and biology and chemistry. Like, they have a lot of the massive underpinnings that are required to take this to the next level. Now we can give them a different viewpoint, and man, like, that's going to change things, right? I mean, those are the people in my mind that are willing to open themselves up to this interesting, different knowledge, different viewpoint, and to take the viewpoint that they've already been given and now do their own thing with it. I mean, that's cool. And so when I get messages from board certified physicians, I'm going, wow, that's pretty fascinating that now hopefully they can maybe take a new trajectory with their career and really help people in profound ways. So anyway, I think it's cool, the fact that we're starting to wake up and we can reach people in new and exciting ways.
It's really fascinating because, typically that's been one of the biggest areas of resistance with, board certified practitioners, licensed practitioners, where they really just don't want to hear it. Who has time to read new research when you're trying to make $22.50 per patient, and seeing 100 patients a day. So it's hard. It's hard, and a lot of them, and I would say maybe some are fairly resistant to opening their mind, but I think a lot of them just don't have the time. Like they've spent years learning some of this stuff, and now they're implementing it, and they really don't have time. But now, I mean, the fact that you can have a podcast and they can listen to it on their train ride or drive to work, and pick up something that they might have to have read a number of research papers or a number of books to try to grasp. I mean, I think it's so amazing to me. Yeah. Yeah. So what is the name of your podcast? The
podcast is called You Optimized Radio. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the foundation of it is pretty simple. I really try to get to information that isn't being talked about as much. And I had Michael on, and we went and talked about the basics of health. And I think really what I'm trying to do is highlight how important the basics of health are, and interacting with our environment in the most natural way possible. But why that works, right? The deep science of that stuff, to help marry the two, right? Because we can't just say do these things. It doesn't have an impact, right? If I just say go outside, that's going to help your health, you're going to look at me like I don't really know what I'm talking about. But if I can explain to you biophysically what the sun's rays can do, how the different frequencies of light can interact with your skin, can interact with the water inside you, can release dopamine in your brain. I mean, that maybe is a little bit more compelling of a reason to make these changes, because as we chatted about earlier, this is hard stuff. It's hard to make these changes. It's hard to try to go outside when we're being caged up inside with most of our jobs. I mean, look at the three of us right now.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all three inside, right? And I try to do some of these recordings outside when I can, but I can't always do that. And so it just highlights the reality of the situation, and I don't pretend to ever think that this is easy for people to just radically change their lives. In fact, that's one of the big things that the big challenges I have is that when I'm working with people, I've got to help them figure out how to implement some of these changes because they're so radically different than what they're used to doing in their daily life. And so it's a tough one. It's a challenge, but that's really the goal of the show, is to maybe try to talk about some of these things that other people and other health channels are not highlighting and not really getting into. There's tons of stuff about diet, and there's tons of stuff about exercise, and we all like to look good and change our diet in a good way, and that's all well and good. I'm all for that. I'm just trying to bring a little bit different angle to the health conversation to hopefully influence it and nudge it in more of the lifestyle direction, because I think there's so much to be learned here, especially in the West. We hear things like Qigong, like Reiki, like acupuncture, even some of the massages, and there's dozens of other modalities and ways to implement health that I think have been forgotten about or maybe pushed to the side because we don't fully understand how they work. And so I think, and this is just my intuition, but I think there's deep, profound physics involved with a lot of the way those modalities actually interact with our body and with our energy. And so I don't think it's good enough to just say chi and talk about this, abstract form of energy that exists. I think we need to understand it. We are very left-brained, scientific-minded here in the West, and so I'm hoping that we can kind of combine the two and get into the physics and maybe try to really understand why some of these things work, because we've known they've worked for thousands of years. There's proof, and we don't need to study it in a laboratory. We just need to observe our surroundings and understand that this has been going on. And so, that's really the goal, is to try to bring some physics and some science behind some of that stuff.
I think maybe we can rebrand Eastern philosophy so it's more appealing to people in the West.
Yeah, we have to, right? Yeah, exactly. That's unfortunately what we're up against right now.
Sure.
No, I gotta say, man, your podcast is cool, and you're covering topics that I haven't seen talked about anywhere else, and you talk about things that I haven't really. And I get around, dude. Like I watch things, I see things, I know people, I go to events, and like it's stuff. Your stuff with water and light and all that stuff, like there's little niche groups where you'll find some of it discussed, but a lot of it is not talked about, and you're covering really cool stuff that people should know and should hear. And I'm one of those people that will accept it's chi and it's energy and cool, let's do this. But you're right, like in this society, like most people don't, and they need to know how it works, why it works. And last time I was getting acupuncture done, I talked to my acupuncturist, and he's full Chinese medicine. He goes to Taiwan and China and everything, and he used moxibustion on me, where there's moxa, like incense burning on the end of the needle on my shoulder. And yeah, it smells fine and it's nice and I like it, but I'm like, hey, what the hell
does this
do? And he's like, oh, it produces infrared heat. And the infrared heat speeds the healing of the wound and blah, 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 blah. And I know about infrared saunas and infrared lamps and infrared light. And I was like, oh, cool, that makes sense. And I said, how often do people ask you that? And he said, pretty much every time. And so it's really useful for him to have that explanation, though. And it's really cool how a lot of research is starting to being done. And, like, the scientists are, like, people are starting to explore, well, this has been done for 5,000 years. Why does it work? And so they were into, like, infrared light, using infrared heat 3,000 years ago, and now we tout this like super new technology of infrared lamps and infrared saunas, and it's like moxibustion.
Right. Well, so. and thank you first of all for saying those nice things. That's the That's the hope, and I hope to continue to do that. So I really do appreciate that. But I think what's funny is that you're highlighting the disconnect, almost like we're speaking different languages. That the Eastern philosophy is saying, here's what we need, here's how it works, and then we kind of just get stuck, or we accept the fact that we don't really understand it. I mean, but even things like, and this is my engineering mind, with things like infrared saunas. And we say, okay, well, yeah, it works and it detoxes and does these things. But then my mind always goes back to, okay, well, why? Mm-hmm. And so there's something called the 5 whys in engineering, and this was sort of a method by which you could ask the question why 5 times, and if you haven't gotten to the root of the answer, usually you can get to the root of the question after 5 whys, and you'll see this with kids, right? Like
I was just going to say that my son does that all the time.
But what's funny is that they will eventually get you usually to a point where you can't answer them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's fun. It's really funny to witness this, because they can stump you. If they ask why enough times, you'll get to the point where you fundamentally don't understand. And we see this so much, and we see it at the deep levels of science. We don't understand gravity to its full potential. We don't understand water. We don't understand the atom. We really don't understand these things, and people think we have them figured out. I mean, it's so funny to me that we can accept all these things in science, and we sort of resist the observational aspect of things, and yet we don't even understand what the heck we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And in fact, in one of the podcast episodes I had with Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's done some amazing things with water, really, really cool stuff, we get into some of these things that we've all experienced, like sandcastles. Why does a sandcastle, why is it rigid? Why with just dry sand and a little bit of water can you create this structure that has some potential to hold up and have some rigidity? And all it is sand and water. Yeah. And you never think about that, but yet you build sandcastles all the time as a kid. Or snowballs, right? When you take dry snow, I think it's pretty snowy where you're at right now, Joe.
Yep.
When you take really dry snow, when it's really, really cold outside and you try to pack it, you can't pack it. It falls apart, right?
I know that because we tried to make a snowman yesterday and it didn't work.
Okay, perfect, right? So, but yet if it warms up a little bit and you add, or you take that same snow and add a little bit of water, you can compact a snowball into a pretty solid ice ball.
Sure.
So why does that work, right? I mean, those are just some principles of water that we don't understand. Why does in the Arctic regions, why does water freeze from the top down? When you look at a lake, the top layer will freeze and it'll freeze downward. Why? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that we don't understand. What is gravity? Well, you say that it's an attractive force between 2 objects with mass. Could it get more abstract than that? I mean, what the heck are we talking about?
I know exactly what that means. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. But yeah, this is important stuff because gravity bends light. Gravity does a lot of important things, and in fact, I think they've basically proven the fact that gravity is not a constant. That it's not 9.8 meters per second squared. It's not a fixed acceleration constant. It actually has some variation. So then the fundamental question is, well, why? Right? So this is the whole why thing. Why is it not a constant? Why have we always been treating it as a constant? So I think we just have to really get to the bottom of what's going on with some of this stuff. Why does an infrared sauna work? Why does massage work? Why does acupuncture work? And either we can accept the fact that it does, as just empirical evidence has shown us, or we can get and try to really understand it. There is no middle ground in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm totally cool with accepting things for what they are, and I think you can get a lot of information out of that if you can apply these things correctly. But if you want to understand something at its core, you've got to go deep, and you've got to go all the way. Mm-hmm. And this is where I see a lot of the studies these days that are missing the boat. They're not doing either. They're not looking at the real observational aspect of things, and they're not looking at the deep science understanding what's going on. They're taking correlations. They're in a fixed environment, and we're making a lot of errors because of this. In fact, I think we just noticed that the most robust microbiome, and you guys are in the microbiome world heavily. So we just found that the most robust microbiome exists in a tribe in the Amazon rainforest, and that they had antibacterial bacteria. What am I trying to say? They had they were resistant to antimicrobials, so they had antimicrobial resistant.
Built-in antibiotics, sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They probably ate a ton of foods. Like, we did an episode last night that was like ridiculous with Corona microbiome, and he talked that traditionally, anthropology says we used to eat like up to 600 foods, like different types of roots and seeds and herbs and this meat and that thing and the bark of this and this mushroom and this thing, and we would eat hundreds and hundreds of foods that would feed an extraordinarily diverse microbiome, and that the average person now eats like 12 foods, and half of them are processed crap.
Well, and really where I was going with that is that we used to think that antibiotic-resistant bacteria were in our guts because we had all these antibiotics in our environment. But yet, when we looked at that population, or that tribe in the Amazon rainforest, they had antibacterial antibiotic-resistant bacteria already within them, and they don't take antibiotics. And so we have to understand that when we look at studies, or we look at some of these things, that we're defining and we're narrowing our viewpoint, and we've got to expand this. And so if you don't, which is okay, but if you do that, you have to understand exactly what's going on. Or else you're going to continue to get these silly studies that claim that red meat causes cancer, and literally you can find anything, that chocolate cures all kinds of diseases, right? Well, okay, let's look at why. Let's look at what's going on. A baby requires a different diet than a teenager, which is a different diet than a postmenopausal woman, right? And that they should all be different depending on where they live. People that live in Alaska should have a different diet than somebody living on the Yucatan Peninsula. And we shouldn't really, we should accept that, almost on the surface, right? Because they're different environments. And so their diets should be different in order to generate health. And so we're making a lot of mistakes because we don't understand the foundational aspects of what we're studying, or what conclusions these studies are giving us, because we can't. And we're trying to control all the variables, but there's literally millions of them. There's literally millions of variables.
And then how realistic is that if you're controlling all the variables, when in real life that's just not the case?
Exactly, you can't. And so this is why when you study a population in the UK, you're going to get a different result than if you studied a population in Uganda. So we have to take all these things into consideration. And so this is my point, I guess. When you can observe something in your environment, you can generally draw pretty decent conclusions based off of that. Or when you understand the absolute foundational nature of something, you can then apply that to various circumstances and various environments. So you either have to do one or the other. You can't be in this middle ground. You're going to consistently make mistakes, and that's what we've been doing in almost everything that I've seen in the research. We draw so many incorrect conclusions because the premise of the study is wrong, or we're asking the wrong questions. So it's.
Are you convinced if we were to continue to study and continue to drill down on things like gravity and water, that there's always going to be a scientific answer to it? If 10, 20, 30 years we just continue to study these things, that there'll be scientific resolution to these, or should we accept that there is something more metaphysical there, and some sort of energy that we can't define?
Yeah. Ooh, good question. I think that's always interesting, and I've thought about that in a lot of ways. We continue to make what we think is progress, right? But yet, if we go backwards, quote unquote backwards in time, we start to realize that everybody else before us was maybe wrong or partially correct. And so it's a really good question. I don't know if
And that partial correctness then skews the whole thing.
Exactly. I mean, at one point, we had Copernicus, and then, so we have these variations of the truth, I guess, that continue to build on themselves. We had Newtonian physics, then we have Einstein, so we continue to move, I guess you could say, progress, but as we have come to realize, we've always been wrong. Nothing in our human history has suggested that we've ever been correct in anything. And so are we moving closer to the truth? Probably. But does the truth always change? Probably. I don't know. This is what's interesting, and this is sort of where philosophy meets science, and I love that realm actually, because it's always been conjoined. If you look at the past, philosophy and science were like brother and sister, and we've actually sort of separated the two, and we've created two distinctly different
sometimes
sciences.
Animosity towards each other's sides too.
And that's the problem. Religion. Yeah, that's the problem. I think science is too rigid in this. They think that they can get into the truth, like they're going to find the truth, and then philosophy is always going to ask, what is truth? How do you define truth? How do you know what you know? Right? Yeah, exactly. So,
question.
Scientists don't want those questions though, because they can't measure that in a lab.
Right, and so I think there is kind of there's definitely some room to bring that stuff back together, because I think that's really how science is going to progress in the most profound way. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there is a truth. I think everybody carries their own truth, and I think that's okay. And I think we will continue to move forward and look backwards and say, oh my gosh, they were so stupid back then. And so what are people going to be saying about us in 100 years or 1,000 years, right? I mean, this is the funny thing. But yet we always think we're right now. Every time, the present scientific understanding, we always think we're the most advanced. We always think that we know more than everybody else, and how stupid they were back then. So, when you take that approach, you quickly realize that you probably don't know very much, and you're probably wrong, but you're probably right at the same time. And so there is just this kind of thing where you're just kind of going along, trying your best to understand things, and all of a sudden now we're in this. Yeah, exactly. Now we're in this weird philosophical debate and question within ourselves. But I think that's important. I think that's really important to understand and recognize that this is a part of the journey. And as you go and you read things on the internet and you listen to podcasts like these, and whatever you might experience, you just got to take it with sort of a grain of salt, and maybe throw it in your pocket, see what happens, and just keep going, because your truth is going to manifest in a completely different way than somebody else's, and that's totally okay. And there's really no point in arguing about it, because you're both right, and there's so many quantum physics experiments that show that. The famous one is the double slit experiment, which shines a beam of light through a little tiny slit, and if you look at the one on the left, you get a photon, a particle, and then if you look at the one on the right, it's a wave. So quantum physics has shown us for quite a while that the result of the outcome will change. The result of the experiment will change depending on how you look at it. So this is interesting, right? So now all of a sudden you've got all these nutritional studies, if you will, and quantum physics is telling us that the outcome is going to change if you look at it. And so you got to ask yourself, okay, well, if we never looked at it, would the outcome be different? So it gets really, really fascinating when you start to think about this crazy complexity that we're all involved with. But to me, that's the fun. That's my weird engineering mind coupled with philosophy, coupled with health, and I just
curiosity.
Have fun with it. Yeah, I just have fun with it. I mean, I think you just have to keep reading, keep learning, keep asking the good questions. And I think that's important. Ask questions and understand that you don't know shit.
Yeah,
you do those two things.
Why.
That's the soundbite.
But you do those two things, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I am going to start asking why 5 times for everything that I hear. Someone can tell me.
You'll realize how little you know. I'm telling you, with the most basic things. Why is grass green? Oh, well, because of chlorophyll. Well, okay, why? What's chlorophyll?
Why does chlorophyll make it green?
Right. I mean, you just start getting, okay, well, maybe you could say that it absorbs this frequency of light. Okay, well, why? Why is it, and then you're just, you kind of get to a point where you're like, I just don't have
Why can I even see it?
Right. Right?
Yeah, no,
Right?
I have a feeling you asked more than 5 sets of why questions when you were a kid.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah. My brain's going to explode. We need to...
that was awesome. Yeah.
That was great, dude. Yeah, let's reel some things in and go check out Jason's podcast and his website and everything he's doing. And we're going to try to get him more involved with what we're doing, too, and have him on some more with... either articles or more webinars or whatever, because we dig what he does and we think you guys should hear more of it. So
well, and I promise it doesn't get this abstract. I don't drift off into
most of these have gotten weird. Honestly, most of them go off in a direction. Have gone kind of weird. And with Chef Lance, we were on the Grateful Dead. With Dan Hellman, we got on existential questions of Taoism. And it gets we've been getting weird. And
good, because we need to move beyond the bullshit nutrition, diet, exercise conversation, because that is exhausted. It's done. There's really not much more to talk about. And I think a lot of go ahead.
I don't want to talk about gluten anymore.
No, and look, here's the thing. I mean, a lot of people are in different spots, so they're going to pick up some of this information wherever they're at and hopefully move in the right direction. So that's great, but I'm just not so sure how much more we need to be saying the same things. Yeah. It's kind of out there. The info's
out there. Yeah.
Do we really need to keep hammering it? And to what end? Because God, it's getting exhausting, isn't it? And it's just, we need to move beyond it. And so I'm glad that these conversations are moving in a different direction. I think it's important. I think we need to go in different directions. So that's cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. That was great. Thank you for continuing to move the needle and asking why, and thanks for spending the afternoon with us.
Yeah,
of course. Thank you guys so much for having me.
The weirdness factor on our podcast.
Always.
Much appreciated.
Anytime, guys.
We'll do some more stuff soon, and thank you.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks. All right, there you go. Jason Prall. Did I tell you? I told you that was a crazy conversation, right? I hope you got something out of that, something that will make you think a little bit deeper about things. But great stuff. Jason Prall, you can check him out at calyxperformance.com. And thanks again to our sponsors. Make sure you head over to cancertruthevent.com to register for that free documentary series. And Hormones, a Women's Wellness Summit. Head to hormoneevent.com to register for that event. Don't miss our next episode with Chef Lance Roll. That dude will just make you feel really good about life. He's got really great energy. You're going to like that one a lot. So Chef Lance Roll on the next episode of the Rebel Health Tribe podcast. Thanks, folks, and we'll talk to you soon.